Hi, I'm Gail Bannock.
And I'm Ilana Santone. Welcome to the She Means Business podcast. Throughout our careers, we faced countless questions and sought advice from other women we respect and admire. And that's exactly what this show is about.
Each week, we aim to help you achieve your goals by sharing our experiences and talking with successful leaders, offering real stories, practical advice, and actionable takeaways for women who mean business. All right, let's do this. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of She Means Business. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're actually interviewing each other in a two-part series. And today, we are going to be speaking to Ilana Santone. We thought it would be fun for you to get to know us. So today, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ilana, to the She Means Business podcast. She's been my boss, my mentor, and now my friend. I have benefited from her counsel many times on everything from getting a job to doing a job, keeping a job, everything from getting over my own imposter syndrome, and then everything that life throws at you. Ilana is a very accomplished leader. She is currently the Senior Vice President of Digital and Connected Retail at Canadian Tire. But obviously, Ilana, you didn't start there. So please tell us where you started, which is a very interesting story, and how you got here.
Well, thank you, Gail. This is an exciting time for us to be interviewing each other, and I'm, of course, thrilled to do it. My career is a bit of a different trajectory because I graduated from a couple of degrees that I really didn't know what to do with. I had a chemistry degree, my undergrad, and then I went to teacher's college thinking maybe that was what I wanted to do, but quickly learned after a year of teaching it wasn't. And I really was, funnily enough, very early in my career at a fork in the road to say, like, what am I going to do? And I had this notion in my head, and I don't know where it came from. I've dug to figure out where it came from. And I wanted to be a buyer. So here I am with a chemistry degree and an education degree. And how am I going to be a buyer? No one would hire me. But serendipitously, someone in my network was working at Canadian Tire, and they were setting up an e-learning division. And that e-learning division was writing lessons for the merchants, the buyers. I was like, well, that's interesting. Maybe I'll try it out. And so they were hiring teachers. I started at Canadian Tire at that time. It was early 2000s. And really the rest is history from a retail perspective, because within 2 years, I was in the merchandising organization. And for the better part of the first part of my career, I spent my time at Canadian Tire in progressive roles in and out of merchandising.
So before we go too far along, I just want to understand this moment. So you are, I'm assuming, in your early 20s, you just finished your teaching degree, and you actually were a teacher. How long were you a teacher for?
For a year.
A year. And at the end of that year, you were at this fork in the road. You are trying to figure out, I guess, am I going back to this? Like, what did you know right away it wasn't right?
Yes. I kind of in the back of my head knew that teaching wasn't going to be for me. And really what it was at the end of the first year, I was like, wait a minute, I got to do it again, the same thing. And I realized then that really doing different things through my career was going to be a really critical element of my career.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I can't even imagine what it took to have invested all that time going in one particular direction, and then to make this very dramatic pivot out of it. That must have been that was really scary, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, I was obviously privileged to be able to do it because I was living at home at the time and made the decision with the support of my parents to make that change in my boyfriend at the time, now my husband. But it was really, really important to me that I found something that I was passionate about. And it was only later in my career that I realized that it was really intrinsic to my values. This notion of solving complex problems, this notion of doing things that was kind of almost in service of, and in this case, service of the customer, combining math, which was always something that was kind of ingrained in me, with something a little bit more creative, but not too creative. So I think it wasn't so much scary as a need I had that I couldn't go back to teaching. I couldn't do it.
So
it just was not going to be for me.
Yeah. Okay. So take us back. So now you're at Canadian Tire as a buyer and progressing through the organization.
Yeah. And I think, my career, the way I would describe my career is in chapters. So the first chapter of my career was at Canadian Tire, about 10 years, progressive roles, either in merchandising or outside of merchandising, but supporting merchandising. And I did that for 10 years. At the same time, I had my kids, did my MBA part-time. And And then I came at the end of my 10 years, it was kind of time. It was another one of those forks in the road where I was like, am I staying here for life or am I going to go out and get more experience? And I made the decision, it was deliberate, to go out into the world and to see what else was out there. And that's a second chapter. And I did that in 3 different organizations, The Body Shop, Target, and Home Depot, all in retail, different kind of areas of retail or different cultures in retail, different approaches to retail, different phases of the retail journey. And there I gained more skills. I gained kind of startup skills in the Target sense. I gained mall retailing skills through The Body Shop. And then I tried new things. Like at the Home Depot, I was more in the strategic leadership area and as a director of strategy. And so I got to see the companies from a totally different vantage point, small, big, mall, standalone, startup, established. And it was just really a great part of the career to learn, very aggressive learning, a lot of change. And then the third chapter has really been the past almost 8 years where I returned to Canadian Tire as a much different leader than I left. And I got to start in digital. And this was a really good example of being brought back by a leader who could see past what I had done and saw what I could do. Yeah. And I've spent 7.5 years really being a student of digital and really in how to drive change through an organization in the digital era that wasn't, I would say, very digitally native. Isn't digitally native, but allowed us to kind of permeate the organization from a digital perspective and kind of continue to transform to an omni-channel retailer where we are today.
That's awesome. Okay, so we met at Target Canada. Yes. And for anybody who doesn't know or remember, Target US expanded into Canada and then within 3 years packed up and went home. And we were all left to go and find our next chapter. Obviously, that was a huge experience for both of us. Tell us a bit about your experience at Target and what you learned from it and how that has changed you.
I feel like you and I could do actually a podcast on lessons learned from Target. Yes. I think there's so much you could say about it. And I know we don't have time to deep dive into that. But I think for me, that was an all-in experience. I think for most of us, or if not all of us, we were there to make Target really as a startup successful in Canada. It was an amazing culture. Yeah. And what was unique about Target was we all started at the same time. So we were kind of crafting the culture. It was magical.
Because even I'm thinking, even a regular startup, what startup has 500 people that start roughly on the same day or within 6 months of each other?
With a framework of a brand, a culture, processes, and a hiring practice, which basically went out to the market and brought people of like-minded values, not skills, values to the organization with different skill sets.
It was surreal. It was surreal. Yeah.
And so I think, what did I learn? Pace of decisions, pace of hiring, pace of actioning. I always talk about this. I mean, we were just in such a terrible situation from an inventory perspective. Remember, we were supposed to do $3 billion. I think we were trending to 1.3. We had ordered all this inventory. There was nothing on the shelf. And I was in planning at the time. And I remember every day going into this room and we had to make decisions, big decisions, decisions that I see today. Most retailers take weeks to decide, and we were deciding daily. Okay, what is the next decision we have to make? We'd sit there and we would ruminate. We would banter back and forth, and then we'd decide and move on. Yeah. And that power of coalition and decision making was so powerful, and something I've really kept with me, because when I sit in rooms and I think about how we're deliberating, when is the right time to just move on and not deliberate?
Now you know that those decisions can be made quickly. Correct. They don't have to take 3 weeks and 4 meetings and a big deck and whatever. Exactly. You know that you can actually make decisions quickly. Exactly. And good ones.
Exactly. And so I think that was a big one. I mean, there's so many things around leadership, values. I learned a lot about myself as a leader. It was a culture that really resonated for me. And I also learned about heartbreak, because I have to say that at the end of it, I was heartbroken. We had given so much of ourselves for 2 years. I loved the brand. I wanted it to be successful. I probably would have spent my career there. So I would have, it was a disappointment at the end, but it was worth it, because the learnings I took and the friendships and the network that I took from that. I mean, we still have a network of people in the US. Yeah. We have a network of people across different industries. And it was just a fabulous experience for that 2 years. I think when I look back on that, it really inspired me as I went forward in my career on how I could lead the same way, just in a different organization, how I could bring a little bit of what I learned into every role that I pursued after that. And I think that's really what I've taken away from that is I learned so much about leadership in that 2 years that I think it really shaped the rest, like since then, in terms of how I lead.
Do you have a bit of a leadership mantra, like a hack or something that you use to empower your team?
You know, it's funny. I always get asked these questions about like leadership mantra or leadership, like what are your principles of leadership? And I've actually tried to start writing them down because it is a question I get often asked. And I think I wouldn't say I have a hack. My biggest hack is hire really good people.
If I were to say that's your thing, yeah.
Yeah, it's my thing. I don't know if it's a hack, but it's what I have found. If you go out and you hire the best people, smarter than you, that complement your weaknesses, and I'm very aware of what my weaknesses are and opportunities, you scale yourself. And the scaling of yourself is what can make not only you, but the people under you and the teams you run successful. And so number one mantra is build a team of people who will lift you up. And that's what I've been able to do. I think I learned that a lot through Target because that was such a big thing. But I mean, through my journey, I've just been able to find and look for and identify really, really strong talent that can actually, allow me to scale myself, which means I get to do really cool things and we get to do really cool things together, which just make us really effective.
I've seen firsthand you hiring and the way that you choose people. And I think that I've never seen anybody who is interviewing for, personality or fit or like character more. So like, tell us, how do you do that? What do you look for? What questions do you ask? Like, when you meet somebody, it can't just be gut, but like, I'm sure gut is a part of it, but like, what do you ask? How do you know?
Yeah, I think it's, first of all, a lot of it is gut. I always say, and I used to doubt myself on this, but I've recently just firmed it up. For me is that it's almost always that in the first 5 minutes you can tell. Like it's very rare that I've done an interview where like, I didn't think so for the first 30 minutes. And then the last 30 was like, oh yeah, that's going to work. It's very, very rare.
They really convinced me on minute 37.
Yeah, exactly. There are some times where you're like on the fence and then the last 30 minutes can kind of say, oh yeah, okay, that really confirmed it. But in the first 5 minutes, if it's a no, it's not a yes later.
And how do you know it's a no? Like what's an example like of an interview that was like, what is it something that somebody says? Is it something, well, let's first get it out of the way. Is it something that anybody can have any control over? Like, are there things that you're like, do not say in an interview, do not do in an interview? Or is it just like everybody has to be themselves and if it's not a right fit, it's not a right fit?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of it. I think that when you bring someone in for an interview, you're really looking for two things. You're looking for, can they do the job? Well, this is what I look for. Can they do the job? And what else can they do? Because if you're just coming to do a job on my team, that's not really what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for, can you do the job we're asking you to do? Can you contribute to the broader team? So can you coalesce and can have a coalition with the other people on my team? Can you lead the team of people that you're charged to lead? Can you think broader than just yourself? Mm-hmm. And can you think of yourself not as that specific leader, but as a leader of the organization that is going to propel our collective purpose or mission forward? And so, if you come in and talk I, and then I did this and I did that and I did this, and you don't ever refer to team or learning or curiosity. Curiosity is one thing I ask for, and I can't give you a specific question I ask. I know there are some people who interview. It's really in the moment, but I really look for curiosity at this time because curiosity is something that at this time with the advent of AI, and rapid change, you cannot come in as one thing and leave as the other, leave as the same thing. You have to evolve. And the only way you can do that is by being curious and being interested in learning and having a growth mindset. So I typically ask questions about how did you learn? What did you learn from? What are you reading right now? Tell me about a leader that's really inspired you. You can start to kind of piece together how are they going to be as a leader of the team. So again, I hire for leaders, not for specialists.
I love that because, a lot of people say in an interview, they say, what are there other opportunities here and how can I grow as a leader here? But I wonder if they've even thought about what other roles could you do here? What other things do you want to do here? Or are you just interviewing for this job as it is? Right. I also don't think every leader is thinking a bit of it like you are, but I think that's really cool. Speaking of leaders, thinking of your own leaders over the course of your career, have you had specific leaders that you think that you've learned specific things from, and who might that be, or what was that you can take away?
It's a great question. I think for me, my view of what a good leader looks like has really evolved over my career. So when I was early in my career, I really looked for how it made me feel, right? Did my leader like me? Did they want me to be successful? Which is obviously, those are things are nice and are important. But I think the leaders that have shaped me the most have been the ones who have allowed me to see something that I didn't see in myself. And in some cases, it wasn't that in most cases, I really loved my leader or the leaders I worked with. So it was neither here nor there. It was more that they were able to teach me something, or we were very highly complementary, that allowed me to elevate myself. So I think of when I was at Home Depot and my leader there, really, he approached things with such a trust. It was almost like, you got my trust until you lose it. And it gave me a lot of space. And it was the first time I didn't feel like I was being managed, but I didn't know what to do with that. Because I was like, oh, he must not like me. He must not want to spend time with me. He must not, need to get into he must not care about the area of scope I was in. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he said, Ilana, it's actually quite the opposite. I actually trust you and know that you're doing such a great job that I don't need the constant connection with you. You're keeping me updated as you need to. And I thought to myself, wow, I can do more. I have space to do more. And that was a very uncomfortable feeling until that clicked for me, that I was able to do that. And then more recently at Canadian Tire, I had a leader who was very digital, came from the US, and our skill sets were so complementary. But I really didn't have a lot of digital knowledge, and he had lots of digital knowledge, but didn't really know how to get things done the same way as I did at Canadian Tire. And the ability to kind of elevate myself and yet find my niche in terms of what I could do allowed me to really elevate myself as a leader. And in both cases, I think it was giving me space to be. And so what I really have taken away from that is this notion of trust. And I think it was even bigger than that, is both these leaders, they weren't worried about mistakes I made reflecting poorly on them. So they were confident enough in their own leadership that they could let me fail and not see it as a reflection of them or even me to a degree, because they could let me fail and still be successful. And I think that's what I really have taken away. And I think anyone who's leading people can do that, is if you can set up an infrastructure whereby you can let your people fail or take risks and not take it personally if they don't succeed, but instead encourage it and see it as a leadership success, to be trusting your leaders to fail. It really just empowers you to do more. Yeah. And I used to worry about that. That was a big worry of mine, is how does my team look? How does that individual show up? And now I realize, unless it's a trend, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. I feel like I'm feeling that more and more, that the key to being a good leader is being a confident leader. If you just, and it's funny, I'm thinking of the comparison to a parent as well. The minute that you realize that your child's behavior is not a reflection on you,
100%,
the better parent you can be. But I think, and when I think back to myself, when I feel like I was the best leader, it was when I was the most confident, and I was, okay, so you made a mistake. That's fine. We'll figure it out. It wasn't the end of the world. And it's because I was not worried about myself and trying to look good. And
isn't it crazy how that is such an unlock, yet something so simple?
I know.
And I think if I had, I wish I had learned that earlier, because I spent a lot of the middle part of my career worrying about that. And I think I would have given people who were on my team more opportunity, and I would have worried less about myself had I kind of learned that earlier on. So I think it was a valuable lesson. And I think it's kudos to these leaders who were able to be confident in themselves enough to give me the opportunity to be confident in myself.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you and I started this podcast as a way of helping women on their career journeys. And obviously we're both very passionate about it. What is it about it for you why is this important for you?
I realized, I've done quite a few different leadership courses over the past few years. And I think one of the big ahas I've had about myself is that, first and foremost, I'm a leader of people and teams. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. It doesn't matter, I could be managing my son's baseball team or leading a big team at work, but that's my passion. My passion is coaching and developing people to reach their best potential. And I think you and I have talked a lot about it, how you just wish you had more time to do it. And I think for me, this podcast reflects my passion to help women, I mean, everyone, to be honest, anyone on my team, but particularly women, because I have such a big team and get to interact and have been kind of in different teams and have an opportunity to interact with so many different types of people. My passion for helping women through leadership, through the journeys of having their children or getting married or, asking for that promotion or getting that promotion or working through their leadership style, showing up in a certain way. I feel like I've lived that to a large degree. And so I have learning that I can share, but I also I have a role to play in helping them feel confident in their journey and to lifting them up and to making a big change in the patchwork of, the company I work with, the companies I work with, or just generally. And so I think this podcast a little bit allows us to multiply ourselves. And if there's one thing that someone can learn from these conversations with us, these conversations with our guests, the debriefs that we do, that would make me feel really great, because I feel like I could have used that when I was younger in my career and I didn't have a lot of mentors or places to go to access that information to allow me to become the leader I was. So I had to kind of learn it myself. And so I think this just plays right into my passion and my value for helping others. Maybe
you're a teacher after all.
Yeah.
You're just doing it in a different forum.
I do think that's a little bit of, I think I've taken that teaching. I think I was always a teacher when I reflect back on, like even in undergrad.
The classroom was just too small.
It was just,
there you go.
Well, I don't know about that, but that's funny.
Okay. So as we wrap up, let's ask the question that we like to ask all of our guests. So what advice, and we've talked a little bit about this, but let's see if you can come up with something else. What advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, I think we hit on it, and it like I couldn't say it any more bluntly than I'm going to say it right now. Let yourself go of worry. I spent so much time in the first, I would say 10 to 15 years of my career worrying about how I showed up, worrying about did I do my best, worrying about did that person like me, worrying about how am I going to do in my presentation, losing sleep, working too hard. And I keep telling my team and the people I work with, stop, don't do it. Because I've wasted a lot of surely it's propelled me and moved me where I am. And it's been a grounding force of just raw energy to move me forward. But I wish I hadn't spent so much time worrying about things. And I think the big, when I reflect on it, there was a moment in my career, I think it was when I came back to Canadian Tire, where I said something in a meeting with very senior executives, and I lost sleep for 3 days. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. And I can't believe I did that. And like, oh my God, what do they think of me and whatever. And then 3 days later, I was in a meeting with the same executive leaders. And I mean, it was just so obvious that it didn't even register.
It was completely irrelevant. Nobody else was losing
Nobody
sleep.
Cared. Nobody even heard what it just was nothing. And it was that moment I clicked out of it. I was like, it's enough.
To quote Dr. Phil, you wouldn't worry so much about what people thought of you if you knew how seldom they did.
You love to tell me that. I totally agree with it.
I love it. It just so resonates. People don't think about how much time you spend thinking about other people. They don't think about you.
Totally.
Let it go.
Oh my gosh. I mean, so liberating. And thank God I got there. Just took me, if someone's listening and you can let yourself do it 10 years earlier than I did, do it.
Do it.
It's not, get help, get coaching, get leaders, work for leaders who will allow you to do it, but just do it.
And I think it's important to let that go. But to your point, keep the drive that propels you forward.
100%.
So and know that the two don't they don't need to coexist. You can let the worrying go, but also work really hard and do really well and move forward. It doesn't mean just because you're not worried about how that meeting went doesn't mean you can't continue to work on doing it better next time.
I could learn from what I said.
Exactly.
Never say that again, ever again. Right. But I don't have to worry. It's so funny. I don't even remember what it was I said.
Of course
you don't have to, but just like learn like every single instance is a learning opportunity. Sometimes you do well, sometimes you don't. And you have to think of all of your moves as a portfolio. And if that portfolio is moving in the right direction, don't worry about the stuff that doesn't matter. And so, that's the lesson I would teach my younger self, because it would just be I spent too many years of my career and quite frankly, my personal life worrying about things I didn't need to worry about.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. We should
fun.
do this again sometime.
I know, we should. Maybe we'll do it with you.
Okay. So this was great. Thank you so much, Ilana. And I think, hopefully this is something that is interesting to people. And I think we'd like to continue to do it and have even additional questions sent in and we can answer and have these kind of episodes. So thank you again. And thank you for listening, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of She Means Business. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and head over to our show notes where you can find helpful links and summaries of key points from the episode. We'd also love to hear from you on LinkedIn or Instagram, so please follow and DM us at the She Means Business podcast. See you next time.